I'm so delighted to be here with y'all today. Thanks so much for joining. We had a record number of folks RSVP for today's call, which is phenomenal. I just love to see this energy as we launch into the election season. I'm Jackie Payne, and I founded Galvanize USA, Galvanize Action, those two to engage, connect with, and move moderate women to defend democracy and advance progress. You are welcome to watch the intro to Galvanize video that we did last month. That we'll put a link in the chat if you're new to us. Today, Galvanize Action is partnering with my PAC, the One for All Committee, to dig into the 2024 elections and what it's going to take to win. I am delighted to welcome our special guest, Celinda Lake. She is one of the foremost Democratic pollsters and strategists. She has worked closely with the White House, the DNC, scores of candidates. She's an expert on women voters and a dear friend of mine. In fact, I was telling the team before this that Celinda was the first pollster I ever worked with when I was a tiny baby lawyer working at Planned Parenthood Federation of America more than 20 years ago. So she taught me how to listen to understand, and I just love Celinda Lake. So Celinda, thank you for joining us to help set the table. And let's start this hour off by having you kind of give us an inside view into what you're seeing in the latest polls and your take on how the election is shaping up.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And it's so exciting to be with you. And I think Galvanize, I think it's been one of the most innovative, important things that has happened on the landscape. And I think, frankly, given the patterns that we're seeing in terms of some of the patterns with younger voters and some other groups, Galvanize is absolutely key to winning the 2024 elections. So it's really a pleasure to be on here with your supporters. Let me leave you with, start with 5 basic conclusions and then move to some of the data. I'm glad to take Q&A later. Trump will be the Republican nominee. People think, oh, the primary numbers show he's in deep trouble. Many of the people that are not voting for him in the primary will vote for him in the general and intensely dislike him, dislike Biden. So this is a very, very tight election. We are seeing a lot of potential third-party vote and drop-off vote. People say they'll skip the ballot, all of that at the expense of Biden. So it's a very, very tight situation, and we need to persuade some swing women voters to be with us who have not been with us in the past. Republicans are voting because they vote for Trump more than Biden. And conversely, Democrats tend to vote against Trump more than they're voting for Biden. So unlike most re-election campaigns, this one's already shaping up to be all about Trump. Unfortunately, Biden's favorabilities and voters' willingness to vote for Biden are on downward trend. Trump is holding steady, which is hard to believe. Most important, though, there is a very, very important racial gap and a very important gender gap that is emerging. And white women are an absolute key to opportunity for mobilization and also for persuasion. People are also very dissatisfied with the political climate, very dissatisfied with the two-party system, hate negative advertising, hate how divisive it is. And we need to look at some new ways that start early, that build relationship, and that really operate on a psychological level with voters. And I think Galvanize fits all of those tickets. So let's look at the data of where we're at. First of all, you can see here the ballot over time. It's been a very close race for over a year. Voters' willingness to vote for Biden fallen off a little bit. And then a gender gap that is very rapidly emerging in the last month. Women now are 10 points more likely to support Biden. Men are even more likely to support Trump. There is going to be a gender gap. It's probably going to be quite big this cycle if we do our job right. And the key is going to be for us to win women by more than we lose men by. White suburban women in general, going to be a very, very important target persuasion audience. If we look at the next slide, you can see here the gender gap over time. And there are lots of gaps out there that are quite big, including the racial gap, et cetera. There is a gender gap, by the way, with every racial group. And there is a gender gap emerging right now in the data with African Americans. But you can see that there's been a very large gender gap, 16 points to 13 points. And we're going to need that gender gap. And again, we've won when we've won women by more than we've lost men by. If we look at the next slide, this one of the things I like about Galvanize is it's not only immediately effective, but it's effective long-term as well. It's establishing a relationship, it's establishing a way of relating to women voters that is very, very effective with them and leaves them with different attitudes and different networks. We're also seeing that Galvanize has in the last few years added to their point of emphasis the 18 to 35-year-olds. And that's a very, very important group, and one that we should be very excited for long-term change, because you can see here young women coming over time increasingly more progressive, younger men stalled in their ideology. I love the headline of this article. It said young men mostly stable, which could be taken multiple ways. If we look at the next slide, there are two issues that are out there that will affect women voters: abortion and the economy. And both of them, it's very, very important to talk effectively to women about them, to persuade them, and also to mobilize them. And a lot of the communication out there is well-intentioned, but not very effective. So first off, we need to talk not about macroeconomics, but about microeconomics and the way the economy affects women and their families. And you can see here, we've never won the presidency where we have not been at least tied on the economy. Here you see data where we ask, are Democrats or Republicans better on the economy? And Democrats are behind by 8 points. And then to the right, you see, are they better for you and your family's economic well-being? And Democrats eke up 2 points. The frame is very, very important. And if we look at the next slide, unequivocally, the most important way to talk about the economy is kitchen table economics, which we'll talk about in a moment. Abortion and cost of living are two very central issues, followed by guns and state of the democracy. Now, when you look at data that says what's the most important problem, abortion is not at the top of the most important problem. But when you ask people what is important in their vote, what distinguishes most, what's an easy way to distinguish two candidates, abortion becomes a top issue, particularly for women candidates, followed by cost of living, gun safety, and the state of our democracy. If we look at the next slide, the way to talk about the economics to women is not to talk about stocks, creations of millions of jobs. It's not to talk about GDP. It's not to talk about how good inflation is getting. It's talking about how people really experience their economics, whether they have a job, whether they can make it on that one job or they're having to get a side gig, whether they can afford food, housing, and medication. And women's market basket is particularly filled with high inflationary items. The average woman in America goes out and shops for groceries 3 times a week. So she is confronted with rising prices 3 times a week. And she knows that she cannot buy with her dollar what she used to be even able to buy, even if wages are up. So there is a profound sense among women that nobody is experiencing or in touch with the economy the way we experience, the way we're trying to pull it together for our families. It's very important to talk about price gouging, healthcare costs, which is the #1 area of inflation, actually, where women have credibility, where Democrats have had a credibility with women, housing affordability, livable wages, wages you can raise a family on, and anything else that would save people money, put money back in your pocket. And women love, by the way, the combination of both policy and news you can use. They love economic tips, and they really, they think, you know, men are very siloed. All of it's coming in for me. I'm talking to my boss, I'm on the phone with my kid, and I just picked up, and I have to go pick up the groceries, and I see that eggs are back up again. So it's all intertwined for women, and they respond very much to that 360-degree view. If we look about the economy, from the economy to the abortion issue, and we look at the next slide, First of all, very, very effective to talk about abortion. We've obviously won initiative after initiative with the help of many of you on this call. Providers and people who have access to abortion care are the two most effective spokespeople. And if anything, we're probably underutilizing the provider voice. There will be Supreme Court cases that will reinforce the power of this issue. There's going to be the decision on mifepristone, medication abortion, which are quite popular, particularly with younger women. There's going to be the decision on providers. And so these are very, very powerful issues for people. People also are convinced that Trump will go in and the MAGA Republicans will go in for a national ban that could include contraception, which is quite salient to younger women and to Latinas if they are reelected. Voters also oppose by very wide margins anti-abortion policies and laws, and they're very anti-jailing people. In fact, rural people, some of the strongest on that, banning abortions, forcing teens and children to remain pregnant. And there's some important language distinctions here. And Galvanize has always paid a lot of attention to language, imagery and language and style and tone of presentation. For example, it tests much better to talk about forcing teens and children to remain pregnant than to give birth. It tests much better to talk about passing a national ban than codifying Roe v. Wade. In fact, little tip, 40% of Americans do not know what the word codify means. So God bless America. The messages that are very strong are around freedom, personal decision-making, politicians not interfering in this decision, the unique circumstances of every pregnancy and every birth, and control, which is particularly strong with younger people and younger women and emerging as an issue. Women think this is really an issue of control. And they think that Donald Trump is really into control and really dismissive of women, including his treatment of everybody from Haley to Pelosi to Taylor Swift. They think he's really got it out for women. It is also effective to combine abortion with other issues like ERA, like equal pay, like paid family and medical leave. It's all seen in part and parcel as a freedom and a control type issue. If we look at the next slide, I'll hand it over to Jackie.
Thank you so much, Celinda. What I'm going to do now is offer some of the data that we have pulled within Galvanize Action, or my PAC, the One for All Committee, and we'll kind of put that into the mix with what Celinda just offered. And then we'll come back and do a Q&A, and you can feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll come back to all of that in just a few moments. So first, we totally agree with Celinda that our audience is going to be key this year. White women make up the largest vote share nationally and about 44% of the vote share in our core battleground states. Through our unique combination of data science, neuroscience, and behavioral psychology, we have identified over 44 million moderate women across the country who we can move to join us. And remember, we don't have to reach all of them, just a tiny fraction in the states where it matters most. In 2020, we lost, the election was won by just 44,000 votes split across 3 states. So it's a tiny fraction. Let's start by delving a bit deeper into how white women feel about the 2024 presidential election. So this is a survey my PAC did last week, where we asked white women nationwide who they would vote for. What you can see is very consistent with what Celinda just shared and a lot of the outside polling. If the election were held today, it would be very, very close. The good news is that these polls tell us how folks are feeling today, not how they will feel in 9 months. There is no need for despair. It's time to work. We have between now and November to persuade enough of these voters to vote for Biden or not vote for Trump. And we do that by connecting with them on the issues that matter most to them. So let's look at what voters told us matters most to them as they're thinking about their vote. The number one issue every time we ask this is always the economy. So here you see 36% of white women picked economy as the number one thing that matters to them when they think about voting. As Celinda said, what they're worried about is making ends meet. They want to know that a candidate cares about their family and will deliver for them. That's what's most important to them. You can see here abortion shows up as in the number 3 slot, which means 11 percentage points of white women say abortion is the number one issue for them. That percentage has actually crept up since the days before Dobbs, and even since we asked this question last quarter. Of course, the issues are not mutually exclusive, right? So there are scores of women, as Celinda said, who name the economy or healthcare or democracy as their number one issue that they care about, but they also very much care about reproductive freedom. There's roughly 3/4 of white women say it's one of the core factors they'll be considering this fall. So if we're able to persuade voters that a candidate cares about them and has their back when it comes to making ends meet by looking at the cost of childcare, healthcare, elder care, prescription drugs, the child tax credit, right, has their back, then the next question they're going to be asking is, okay, well, who's with me on abortion and reproductive freedom? So that has us focused on economy, reproductive freedom, and then democracy and healthcare as the core proactive conversations we want to be having with our audience this year. A quick note about immigration. You'll see it shows up as the number 2 issue most cited here. That's a spike since the last time we asked in November. And that spike is primarily driven by base Republican voters. I'm sure you've noticed that there's been an uptick in culture wars, right, with a focus on immigration and attacks on trans youth. These issues are, and pretty soon you'll see more on crime. These issues are being stoked by former President Trump and his party to create feelings of fear and threat and grievance, right? They want to exacerbate the feeling that things are out of control and that we need someone to protect us. It's our job to connect with movable women on the issues they care most about, connecting on their values and helping to shape their perspectives and positions and what they expect from government and candidates. We also inoculate against the really ugly culture wars that make them feel threatened and insecure. We turn the heat down on those grievance politics, and we demonstrate, and the PAC demonstrates which candidate will share their values and deliver for their family. And we, over time, have learned how to do this very well. So in 2022, Galvanize Action won an award for having an unprecedented persuasion effect. We ran a 7-month randomized control trial to test the impact our ads had on voters in real life in the midterms. And you can see here that on the economy, we helped reduce the blame put on Biden or the Democrats dramatically, and we shifted that blame towards greedy corporations and the wealthy. So that's where Celinda talks about price gouging. That's the kind of thing we did that helped to shift. Instead of blaming Biden and Dems, we reallocate the blame to those greedy corporations that are price gouging. On abortion, we didn't just get folks to become more pro-choice. We moved them 5 percentage points to saying that their elected officials should protect the right to abortion. So they want to see this position in their candidate and their elected officials. The One for All committee then ran ads that led to a net 14.1 percentage point shift in vote choice for the Senate Dem candidate. These are extraordinary results. Usually you're happy if you see a 1 or 2 percentage point movement. Those results have been examined and validated by 4 different teams of outside experts. And it's sort of conclusive. We really know how to connect with and move these women. So how do we do it? We're successful because we understand where our voters are emotionally. We tap into their values, we understand their motivations, and we understand what's holding them back from voting to protect our democracy and advance progress. We meet them where they are, and we offer hope and solutions. This slide, just shows you a little bit of how we do it with using neuropsych. even without showing you or letting you listen to the language, what I want you to see here is we think about things like saliency. When a woman sees this ad, a member of our target audience, can she picture herself in the situation? Is it a face like hers? Does the kitchen look like hers? Does it remind her of hectic mornings getting her kids ready for work? Getting ready for school, right? So we're making it salient, and it feels like someone she knows in her community. That offers social proof. When we don't know what to think, when we have doubts, we're not sure what's true or what's right, all of us turn towards social proof to see what other people in our community think. And that helps us shore up our sense that, okay, this is an okay thing to think, right? On an issue like childcare, where we hold some internalized barriers that actually, as moms, we're just supposed to do it all ourselves, this is especially key. We need to address the barrier of deservingness. Having a messenger like this helps with that. What you're seeing on the right is an example of, we went and created this ad, and I'm going to show you the ad in just a second, but we also did it in a low lift sort of selfie version, and that lets us run it on TikTok or Facebook Reels, etc. And it's fits in with what women are expecting to see and makes this messenger seem like an influencer they know and trust. And it lets us feel like, okay, let's see what she thinks. She's part of my team, right? So we're going to watch her ad in just a second. And what you're going to hear is a couple of values that this messenger uses that were specifically designed for our audience. So let me just say before we get started, if this doesn't resonate with you, it's okay. We didn't make it for you. We made it for folks who are high in merit, high in independence, and high in in-group care. So let's watch this ad and see why it works.
Having been a working single mom, I know it isn't easy. Cooking dinner, sports practices, homework, you name it. That's why I've dedicated my career to supporting families at a program that gives free childcare to single working moms. We've all struggled at times. If the government and businesses work together the way they do with Social Security and other programs, we'd all be better off. Every family deserves this kind of support.
Great. So that ad, when we tested it, we test every single ad we create first in the lab, and then we track it in field. But this ad moved suburban women to be more supportive of government-funded childcare by 18 percentage points. It had even greater success among folks with more conservative ideology. The reason for that is because we're addressing some of these things that we know we need to address for this audience. We're showing that this single mom is a hard worker, that she has been doing it, right? And that she is the hero of this story. But if the government could come in and support and help her, and give that kind of support to all families who deserve it, that would be better, not only for her and her family and her children, because we all want what's best for children, but also it's better for the economy. And that's really the thing where our movable women relate to and understand, if we can provide this kind of childcare, it will help lift the economy for everybody. Let me move you on next to a look at abortion. I'm going to show you how we apply similar strategies to reproductive freedom. And in this case, we're using compassion and fairness as the main value frames. As Celinda mentioned, our audience agrees that criminalization is wrong. They're upset with the punishment that's happening of providers. Our audience really loves nurses and doctors, and that's not right. But our audience also feels like what's happening in the aftermath of Dobbs is not fair. It's cruel. What's happened to our compassion? And tapping into their sense of compassion and their desire for things to be fair and have order and rules is where we're having success here. So let's look at this ad.
These new abortion policies have been absolutely terrible for women. You've got women being denied abortion medication, becoming infertile because they can't get treatment for miscarriages, and publicly shamed for aborting due to medical complications. It's just not fair. These abortion policies don't know our circumstances or our reproductive needs. We need to trust women, families, and doctors with these decisions.
In that ad, when we ran that one, it moved moderates 9 percentage points to say that any law that restricts a woman who wants to have an abortion is unfair. So that's a pretty high bar, right? Any law that restricts a woman who wants to have an abortion is unfair. And it even moved women who said that they are personally against abortion, but they support it to be legal. Those women saw this ad and they were in favor of, they said any law that restricts a woman's access to abortion is unfair. They moved by 11 percentage points, right? So we're seeing really successful movement when we tap into those core values that are most resonant with our audience. Galvanize Action is developing new ads right now that are leveraging the sort of, we're getting so many attacks on reproductive freedom, right? Whether it's, we're going to see these Supreme Court cases. There was just a decision this morning that was pretty bananas. Idaho is punishing reproductive, emergency room providers, right? So there's all these attacks on reproductive freedom. Galvanize Action is making new ads now that help to lift that up, to connect with women and say, this is really not fair and not what we expect from our government or from the candidates who we're going to vote for. So you'll see in these new ads a discussion of the unfairness. Will reinforce the government's duty to safeguard reproductive freedom, to be against these kind of unjust policies. And then ultimately, my PAC will do what Celinda said, which is draw a clear contrast between the candidates and the parties on this issue. The contrast could not be more clear, and we'll use that as a way to help women decide who stands with them and who shares their values once we've addressed the economy issue. Before we turn to Q&A, I just want us to take a 2-second look at refreshing our memories of what happened in previous elections and where this election is going to be decided. So here we have a quick look at 2016. This was before Galvanize Action or One for All was in existence. And you see Trump lost the popular vote, but won the White House by flipping the blue wall states, and even by the tiniest of margins. In 2020, when Galvanize Action and One for All Committee were on the case, the blue wall was restored. We helped to flip these OFAC helped to flip these 3 key states back to blue. And if you look at the next slide, what you're going to see is what are the battleground states? How tiny were those margins in 2020? And what does it mean as we look at 2024? If you look at these 7 states, these states were decided by less than 3 percentage points. That's like 10 to 20,000 votes out of a pool of millions. So very narrow margins. But the good news is that since 2020, after we squeaked that out, Democrats did better than expected in the midterms, right? The pro-choice side has won every single abortion ballot initiative run since Dobbs. And Democrats continue to win special elections, including the one last week in Long Island, by running pro-democracy, pro-choice candidates. So how do we ensure that when Trump is actually on the ballot, we can maintain these wins, protect democracy, and advance progress across issues? We work hard now. So Galvanize Action and the One for All Committee are going to continue to prioritize the blue wall states. This is the most direct path for the One for All Committee to help retain the White House. As we said, in these states, white women make up something like 44% of the vote share and the bulk of the persuasion universe. So if we reach out and connect with even 1 out of 10 of the audience members in these states, and we get them, Biden could retain the White House. In addition to those 3 states, once we raise the money that we need to be working to defend the blue wall, we will also expand into other key presidential battlegrounds. You can see those key battlegrounds represented here. And our top priority is the White House, but it's not our only priority. In Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, there are nested Senate and House races that we can help with. And then in states like Ohio and Montana, there are Senate races that we are uniquely qualified to help with, given the outsized role that white women will play in those elections. That's why we are fundraising so rigorously right now, so that we can make sure that we are able to clear the barrier and get into these 3 battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and then expand our impact since we know how to reach these women and we can help win. I'm going to just mention to you before we're going to turn to Q&A in just a second. What I want to say is the reason we have been so effective is because we don't go in at the last minute. We get an early start and we help to shape the perspective and positions of women now, before all the noise of the election starts, right? The streaming space that we use to run these digital ads is already getting bought up. We need to be able to fundraise enough to secure that space so we can go in and connect with these women and do so on an ongoing basis. We follow the data to show us what's the frequency, how much do we have to be talking with these women in order to persuade them to stand up for democracy and advance progress. To be able to reach that frequency, we need to be investing right now. So the good news is we have a $50,000 match today. I want to thank Renee Lindy for bringing that match to us today. And we'll talk more about that after we dig into the Q&A. So let's put this slide down and just see what questions folks have for Celinda and me.
Great, we're getting lots of good questions coming in. The first one is for you, Celinda. Can you talk about what role do you think the multiple counts against Trump will play in this election?
Yeah, and we actually have some great data on that. So this is the question of the hour. So let's bring that data out, Bally, while we're talking. So first of all, there are frankly too many court cases against Donald Trump, and people evaluate the court cases quite differently. So they think that grab him by the pee was very different than the rape trial. Excuse me. They also think that every wealthy person exaggerates their wealth and doesn't pay their taxes. The two that are most salient to people are January 6th and the Georgia case. And by far, the Georgia case is the most influential because it's a jury. It is taking away people's votes, and everybody remembers the phone calls to Republicans who rejected him. This is some data among Republican voters, and you can see asked two different ways. You have 45 to 52% of the Republicans who say, I will not vote for him if he is convicted of a felony crime by a jury. Very, very important, by the way, to emphasize jury. So these court cases could be game-changing. I think he knows it, and it's why he's trying to take down the couple that would really make the difference for him.
Thank you. Okay, next question is for you, Jackie. Can you talk about if you are, what you think about crime and immigration in terms of, are they going to be major factors, and how you plan to address those with your audience?
Yeah, they definitely will be major factors. Part of the reason we know that is we did some analysis working with data scientists last year. We went back and looked at what were the factors that were most predictive of white women deciding to vote Republican. And what we saw there was one of those issues was feelings of social insignificance. And then a second issue was how did they feel about transgender folks, right? And so the social insignificance, I'm so sorry, my little 13-year-old is making a lot of noise, but God bless him, he's bringing me coffee. So the first one is around social insignificance. That the reason that's predictive of white women's vote choice is because they're feeling like the rules are changing. Who's looking out for me, right? Thank you, babe. When that happens, and so sorry, the rules are changing. Who's looking out for me? And they see the story of immigrants coming across the border, and they think, oh, why are they getting the benefits? Why did they get free COVID? Why are they getting health care? Who's looking out for me? The healthcare costs are so expensive for me, right? And so we see Trump is really effectively using immigrants and crime and attacks on transgender folks as a way to make people feel insecure, right? I don't feel safe. I feel insecure, and I feel aggrieved. Why aren't I being taken care of in my country, right? So one of the things that we do is inoculate against these culture war messages. And we run these messages right now, and we have a way of connecting with folks on their compassion, and that's consistent with how they view themselves, right? In a way that says, I'm a compassionate and loving person. How do I see the world? When we talk to them, we're able to dial down this kind of heat so that that's not what's most important to movable women. And we get them to return to what they do care most about, which is making ends meet and secondarily reproductive freedom. So we'll continue to do some of this work in between now and running up to the elections that turns the heat down on those issues and then lets women focus on the things that do really matter most to them and their families, which is economy and repro.
Okay, I've got another one for Celinda here. A question about if flip-flopping by GOP House members on immigration, are you seeing that as something that's moving anybody towards blue?
No, there's a general sense of nothing getting done. And that's how people are storing it, that the two sides are just playing political games and nothing is getting done. We would be helped, honestly, by the president taking executive action or doing something more dramatic. There are a number of proposals, like work permit proposals, dreamers, et cetera, that are quite popular with the public. But people think this is a problem that's not getting solved. The thing that's really undermining, people aren't paying attention to Washington at all right now. The thing that's really breaking through and what is dangerous here and deliberately chosen are these images of people flooding across the border and chaos. And it's all of the kinds of things that feed the emotion that Jackie was talking about.
Great, thanks. Another one for Jackie. Jackie, can you talk about how you identify the persuadable group of moderate white women?
Oh, sure. We have the most amazing research team. I just want to really lift them up and say thank you to them. They do really hard work. They work with outside data scientists and other firms, and they figure out by doing a regression analysis, looking backwards to see what has caused, what is most predictive of women's vote choice over time. And they look at the psychographic traits that are most predictive. Once they identify those, they map those onto the voter file. And then they take out the segment of folks who are, the base for the Dems and the base for the Rs. And they say, okay, those folks are entrenched. They know what they think. We're not going to spend time talking with them. They've made their plans. But actually, there's a huge swath of folks in the middle who consider themselves moderate. They're not hyper-partisan. In fact, I think Celinda could probably talk about how they don't like either party. But those folks we can connect with them. And the way that we find them is through those psychographic traits, right? So once we identify them, match them to the voter file, we can say, okay, in Wisconsin, there are this many women who match that psychographic profile. We can see from their voter ID where they live. We can look at their consumer and media and entertainment data to see what shows did they watch. And then we can say, okay, if she is most worried about reproductive freedom, we really want to connect with her. Let's do one of these ads that match her particular set of values. She's high in compassion, right? And then let's send that ad to her in front of the television show that we know she watches. That's where the streaming TV ad buy comes in. If we know she watches this entertainment, let's send it to her. Then we have the ability to track, did a connected device in that voter's household watch the ad? How long did they watch the ad? How many times did they watch the ad? Once we know that and we say, okay, that's enough frequency that meets our criteria for persuasion, then we can move on to her next door neighbor or talk to her about another issue that we know she needs to hear about us from. There's a little more than you asked for, but that gives a big picture.
That's great. I'm going to combine two and maybe have one of you speak to one and one to the other, which is we're getting a lot of questions about like the what are the messages that are working with this audience, specifically around economy and repro. So one person asked about the child tax credit and that it will hopefully get expanded. Is that an effective message around the economy with this audience, and how would you talk about that? And we got another question about if you're finding with moderates and leaning rights and independence, does talking about reproductive freedom and choice resonate more than using the word abortion? So maybe Celinda, do you want to take either the economy one or the repro one, and maybe Jackie take the other?
Let me take the abortion one. Choice does not test more effectively than abortion. And actually, we no longer need to use euphemisms, particularly post-Dobbs. And it's not even choice, honestly. There was, for a while, choice has not been that good a word because choice sounds kind of frivolous. You choose the color of a swimsuit, you choose what dessert you're going to have after dinner. It's always been personal decision making that has been much stronger. And around that schema, freedom, control, who's going to make the decision, whether politicians are going to interfere. So choice has not been that strong a frame for quite some time, actually. A lot of politicians, particularly older politicians, feel more comfortable using it, but they shouldn't. Abortion tests fine. And people are like, yeah, it's abortion. That's fine. Abortion is healthcare. That's fine. Thanks to a lot of the work that many of you on this call have done.
Yeah, I totally concur based on what we're seeing and emphasizing you can say abortion and you can talk about in the freedom frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Freedom from all these unfair rules. On the economy front, what we see, we heard this from Celinda, we see this in our data, that women we manage a lot of the care parts of our economy, right? So we're the ones worrying about childcare. We're the ones worrying about elder care. We're very much worrying about healthcare prices, the cost of prescription drugs. And so when we did a whole research deep dive into this last year, where we looked at the psychology behind childcare. Why do we say we support it, but why hasn't it happened yet? Why aren't we demanding it? What's holding us back? What are those psychological barriers for women? A lot of that comes to around deservingness. But we are able to, because we go deep and understand that, and then we test the messages to figure out how to connect with them in a way that helps overcome those barriers and connect to their values so that they actually do say, I do deserve this, and my government should be providing it for me, and I'm going to demand that of a candidate. The child tax credit is a great example of something that we've done in the past. You can see some of our child tax credit ads that we've done previously, and we'll do that again. And I think Celinda would speak to this as well. When voters look at the economy, we do tend to trust Democrats on things like care and on healthcare more than Republicans. And you can check me if I'm wrong, Celinda, but because of that, we're able to talk to voters about that. And then you'll see President Biden pushing for child tax credits, right? Pushing for more affordable childcare, pushing for paid family leave, protecting protecting price gouging around prescription drugs and making it more possible for folks with diabetes to get their drugs at a reasonable cost. So those kind of steps that Biden has been taking throughout his presidency and will continue to take this year to the degree that he can are things that we can lift up, and women, it matters to women. They trust Biden on that. And it's something that it's just super resonant. Celinda, would you add anything more on that?
The only thing I would add is that when we talk about the caregiving agenda, it's really important, particularly when you get to a little bit older woman, to talk about the broader caregiving, disabled, sick spouse, sick family member, because it's important to remember in the projections are for 2024 that only 28% of the electorate will have a child under 18. So we are talking about caregiving, but we are talking about a much broader panoply. And a lot of people have multi-generational caregiving that they are responsible for.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the research we did last year, what we found was, as I mentioned, that some women were feeling like, oh, I'm not sure if I should, I'm not, there's a barrier to supporting demanding childcare because of that internalized, like, it's really my job to do it. They don't feel the same way about elder care.
Right.
When you talk about elder care, they're like, oh my gosh, this is hard. I need some help up in here. And so we can talk to women about elder care and we can get them to come along on childcare as well. The other thing I'll note is, because of that point that Celinda just made, when we do childcare ads, one of the things we test is how do people without young children in the home respond to that? And that is a marker of success for us. If we don't see that, it's something that we would say, oh, let's go back to the drawing board. In the ad that I showed you previously, the single mom talking about childcare, I can check, but I believe it's women without young children in the home supported that ad by 13 percentage points, right? So it's part of our measure of success that even if it doesn't apply to you, is the ad that we're creating something that says, oh, I'm going to support this for someone else, which that's fantastic for us because we know that we can connect with women when we talk about the things that are going to truly benefit their family. That is the easiest direct path in. But if they also see something else and think, oh, I support that, even if I wouldn't benefit, I would support a candidate who says that, that's an even higher marker of success. And we watch for that and we're really proud of that.
Okay, I think we have one last one. If you both can answer this one, how optimistic do you feel right now?
Celinda.
Well, I will tell you, I'm pretty worried, and I will be a lot more optimistic if Jackie wins the lottery, because I really do believe this is one of the answers that we have out there to a very, very problematic landscape. So I will say to you, I am very worried. And I think that we must increase our margin with swing women, because we are going to see some more defection to third party. We are going to see some turnout issues with young people, and we have to make up for it somewhere.
I think it's smart to be worried based on what the data shows us today, but I also feel confident that if we are doing the work we know how to do, we can win. So I don't feel anxious. I feel like, okay, let's go, right? I feel like let's put our boots on and let's get this done. I also would say, and the reason I feel confident about that is because we're not guessing. We're not supplanting what we would want to see in an ad for what our audience needs to see, right? It's very rigorously tested. And we make sure it works and we only put things out there that are proven effective. So the fact that I know we can create the material and we have done it and it's worked before makes me feel optimistic if as Celinda says, we can get the money to do it. And I just want to name, of course, it's not just us. We have some amazing partners in this work, other folks who are taking different slices of the electorate and doing their part too. And this is going to be one of those elections where, it's going to take all of us, including all of you on this call. So I feel optimistic because I feel the power of our community.